Hello, this is Cynthia B. with the Conservation Garden Park. Today, I'm going to teach you how to use Google Maps to create a really simple base map for drawing a landscape design for your property. Now, you can just use the map straight across, just print it and use it, but really you're going to need to know some of these measurements in order to accurately plan for how much materials you're going to need to complete the project. So how much mulch you'll need to order and those kinds of things. So it is important to know all of our dimensions and such. And so today I want to show you how to do that quickly. So if you go to google.com/maps, then you'll have an opportunity to type in your address. Use that to get to your property, and once you've kind of navigated to your neighborhood, zoom in until you get to this point. Now, we are in the Maps view. You can see down here there's an option for Earth, and we'll do that a little bit later. But right now we're in the Maps view, and that's exactly where we want to start because we want to measure the perimeter, and this is the easiest way to do that accurately. Now, if you right-click your mouse, that's the secret, right there, it'll bring up this little options right here. First thing I would do is go ahead and print a copy of this, and so you have something to scribble on and to write your measurements on as we go along. If you want, you could design straight on this, but if you were going to do that, I'd probably recommend the Earth view anyway. But let's get started measuring. So after we've printed and we have a place to write down what measurements we've got, we want to do this measure distance. Left click, and here's this little point here, and then I'm going to left click again, and that gives me a distance of 86.27 feet. Now, this is not going to be a perfectly accurate measurement. I could measure this 5 times and it will be slightly different each time. But this is a landscape plan, not a missile silo, so it's okay if we're off by a foot or two. The worst that's going to happen is we got to squish a little here or squish a little there. But it's not a big deal. So once we have that figured out, we write that down, and I would round up or round down. So in this case, 86.27 is going to round down to 86. Now, if I just go to the next point and click, it's going to take a cumulative measurement, which is not what we want unless we're trying to calculate the area of our property, in which case you do that all the way around in order to calculate area. But we're not trying to do that. We just, or at least not at this point, we just want to know what the lengths of everything are. So let's try this again. Right click, measure distance, and click here. See, again, now we're 86.72. So you can see we're going to be off by a foot or two depending on where I lay that dot down each time, but still close enough for a quality plan. Then I can grab that point and drag it over here, and now I come up with a distance of 124.44. Write that down. I can kind of work my way around the entire property measuring the perimeter. Okay, let's clear that out. Now the next thing will be measuring the house. I would recommend that we change to the next view before we do that, because although this looks like it would be super easy to measure, it gets a little bit tricky because these are a simplified shape. But one thing I do want to mention before we do that, it's tempting when you measure to think that you just would go from this corner to this corner to figure that out, right, and have that measurement. The problem is it's going to be really difficult to calculate in the landscape what angle this is. So what I would do instead is make sure that when we measure that we're parallel to the house. Okay, and write that down, 38.5, and then come here to the corner. This way we're sure that we're always working parallel and and using right angles, just because there's not a really great way to measure angles in this program, and that'll be the easiest and lead you to be the most successful. Okay, so now we've figured that out. We've got the measurements we want from this view. We'll switch over to Earth view, and as you can see, this house already has a pretty nice yard. So now we can measure the house. Do the whole right click thing again, measure distance to that corner, 53.95, and you would go around the entire house measuring the house until you felt comfortable that you had that laid out. Then, to figure out how we're sitting in the side yard here, you've got to measure to an exact point. So ideally, you would come across parallel to the property line, or house parallel. Either way, you've got to be at a right angle. So we'll come across here, and that's 13.97 feet, so we'll say 14. So that's 14, and then we got to come to the back corner. Now, that's a little bit hard to figure out. So one thing I can do is I can turn my view. And if you come down to this corner, you see the option to rotate the view. There we go. Now I can come here and pick up that point again. Now that I can see a little bit better where to lay that down to be on the edge of the property. And that's 46.54 feet. So now we've got that measured. Okay, so let's measure distance again. Now, in this property, we have an existing tree. This is actually right on the property line with the neighbor, but we're going to use it anyway just for reference. So move that point. So we put that there. We measure the distance to the property line, which in this case is 2.5 feet, which is usually a bad idea to put a tree that close to your neighbor's property line, but there you go. If you have that circumstance, then just incorporate their tree as part of your plan, even though it's slightly off your property. So, okay, measuring distance. So we basically came out to, okay, from here. Now that if you drag it, you can change where it goes. Separately click that. Get that to the property line. All right, so we're about 3 feet. And then we bring this down here to this edge because this is a known edge. And now we're at 30.89, so roughly 31 feet. So that gives you a fairly good idea of how that tree sits in relation to everything else. And you would do that same thing to site existing trees. Now, if your property is really covered in trees and you have really high, heavy tree cover in your neighborhood, this technique may not work quite as well for you. You may have to do a lot of shifting your view around to try to get the information that you need. And you may have to do some hand measurements. But ultimately, this is a fairly simple way to see what you have and what you're dealing with in your landscape, so you'll know what you need to do to make the changes you want. And that's it. That's all it takes to use Google Maps to create a simple base map, measured to scale, to serve as the foundation for your landscape design. To learn more about how to design your property, visit us at localscapes.com, where we'll teach you a simple 5-step process that any homeowner can apply to create a landscape similar to the one that you see here. Localscapes is all about localizing your yard to the place that you live. Come and visit us and let us help you learn how to create a landscape that works for you and Utah.